interest in the bill. So we'll look at the proposal that Katie has worked really hard on. And Katie, we can't thank you enough for the overtime. It's just amazing. We're at a stage right now where every minute is precious, and you've used a lot of your minutes. So let's move. Why don't we go right to the draft that Katie's brought to us, and it is, Katie, you introduce it, and draft 3.1, I guess.
Okay. Katie McGlynn, Office of Legislative Counsel. I'll pull it up on my screen so we can all be looking at the same page. So this is a strike all amendment of H171. And I've already scrolled down to section 10 because this is where the first change occurs. So if you remember, just to give you kind of an overview or refresher of what we're looking at, sections 10 and 11 of this bill deal with the ARPA money that is coming in, and it's coming in and dedicated for childcare in two different portions. So each of these work groups that looks at different portions of ARPA money dedicated for childcare. And the stakeholders in each of these groups are a little bit different depending on kind of the pot of money that they're focusing on. So the committee looked at this group of stakeholders, I want to say it was last Friday, but please don't quote me on that at this point. No. All the days kind of merged together. But we were looking at the concept of somebody from the business community being represented in the group. And then there is committee discussion as to how there are many types of businesses and many types of employers, and we want to kind of capture and recognize that range. So I've changed the language here to say, as well as individuals representing a range of employer and business interests, instead of just a representative of the business community. So that is that particular change.
So, and what I'm going to say is, committee, if you have questions of clarification, or you think that the change doesn't reflect what you thought we were doing, just speak up, because again, I can't see everyone.
Okay, so that was, we're still in section 10, and then in subsection B on page 13, we get to kind of the instructions for this working group, what they have to look at and what they're going to be considering. And so there was conversation whenever this was last taken up as to how subdivisions 1 and 2, the funding that would be given, the language had taking into consideration funding necessary to ensure that the co-payment for the family participating in CCFAP would not exceed 10%. In subdivision 2, considering that CCFAP, that families whose incomes are up to 400% of current FPL might benefit by expanding the scope of the program. So there was a conversation recognizing that ARPA money couldn't be used as ongoing funding for this purpose. So instead, language was added to recognize the fact that any ARPA money that could be used towards these goals would be bridge funding. So language was added in to reflect that conversation that this isn't ongoing funding. This would be looking to use ARPA money for bridge funding for these purposes.
So Katie, when remind us, is this, well, remind us when you get to it, but the funding that needs to be deployed very quickly, that's a key piece.
Sure. So this, as I said, there are two working groups. This working group that focuses on ARPA, this one is only providing report back for the legislature to act. So you'll see that in subsection C, that by November 30th of this year, DCF is to submit a report to various groups. So the legislature has longer to act on these recommendations. So there's no spending authority here in section 10. This is just a report back making recommendations as to whether the ARPA funds can be used in particular ways and making recommendations on that piece. So the kind of companion sister section is section 11, and this is what you were referring to, Senator Lyons. again, this is a working group that is looking at ARPA money. This is kind of looking at a different pot of ARPA money that is still dedicated for childcare. This is looking at the childcare stabilization grants. And the testimony that the House heard from Sarah Truckle of DCF was that this particular pot of money needed to be moved faster than the block grant in section 10. To reflect that, to accommodate for that, there is language in this section, in this subsection C, that one has the department providing the same type of written report with its recommendations. However, this report is coming back earlier, on or before September 1st, and it's going to the Joint Fiscal Committee and then chairs of the policy committees. And then there's specific instructions that when JFC receives this, the House had 5. The proposal here is to change it to 10 days to approve or reject the working group's recommendations. If Joint Fiscal Committee doesn't act in that 10-day window, then the recommendations are deemed approved and the department is authorized to distribute the funds according to the recommendations submitted. So you'll see there that that's the authority for that money to go out the door right away without having to wait for further action from the General Assembly when you get back in January. And then there's language if Joint Fiscal rejects the recommendation within that 10-day window, it is to hold a meeting as soon as possible and receive testimony from the department. So that's the kind of the mechanism that was set up in section 11, and that's how section 11 differs from section 10.
I'm sorry that Senator Cummings is not with us yet. I don't think she's come online yet, on Zoom yet. So this is something we haven't run this past the Joint Fiscal Committee, but certainly the timing, expansion of time would give them perhaps give them the time they need to complete the work. So that was the thinking there. 5 days might feel very short given where we are. So go ahead.
Okay. Next, section 12, we have no changes. This is the attendance versus enrollment study that DCF is going to be doing by July 1 of next year. And then in section 13, we do have a more substantial change happening here. So if you remember our earlier discussions, the section 13 has dealt with a systems analysis study. The version that came over from the House had Building Bright Futures doing this work and in consultation with stakeholders. So this proposal instead has Building Bright Futures developing an RFP, issuing an RFP to hire an independent consulting entity to do the work that's in section 13. And this RFP process, both developing and issuing the request and selecting the individual to do this work, would be done in consultation with the chairs of the House Committee on Human Services, on the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare, or their designees. And I see that I have or instead of on, so I'm going to change that right now. The chairs of the House Committee on Human Services and on the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare, their designees. So a little typo there. So the work, again, Building Bright Futures, hiring a consultant through RFP process
Katie,
in consultation with chairs.
Katie,
Yes.
I think I'm looking at that sentence again. I know it's a minor detail, but and on the Senate committee. Oh,
Let me see.
it'll be done in consultation with the chairs of, and just take out on, I think, but that's, help me.
Yes, thank
Yeah, okay, we're good.
you. And yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we have that RFP process beginning September 1st of this year. That's happening in A1. And then in subdivision 2, by July 1st of 2022, the consulting entity is to submit the analysis and recommendations to the policy committees. And I just want to kind of flag this date, September 1, 2022, The House version had this report coming in September 1, 2022. And the reason that this was pushed forward is to give in the next section, section 14 on financing, to give the financing consultant more time with this report to inform the financing consultant's work. So this date was pushed up to kind of provide a few extra months with this report. And then in subdivision 2, we go on to have the different things, the different items that this consulting entity is going to be looking at. And there's been one new item added, and that's data-driven accountability for improvement of the current well-being and future outcomes of children and families.
How did what?
I want to
so-
say ensuring, we need a verb.
Yeah, I'm trying to,
So ensuring data-driven.
thank you. That's good.
And thank you for your patience. I was editing this up to the very last moment here. So ensuring data-driven accountability for improvement of the current well-being and future outcomes of children and families. So that new item was added to the list that the consultant is going to be focusing on. And then we have section 14. This is the
Katie,
financing study.
Katie, I'm not going to, I don't want to interrupt too much, but just to remind us that there are dollars in the current, is it in the current iteration, current budget, or is it would this go into the next budget? Because it begins in 2022. So is
So
there money?
the House version was using section 10 to look at whether ARPA dollars could be used to
Right.
fund sections 13 and 14. This new proposal moves up the date of some of these reports, these studies. So I think we'll have to look at that timing more carefully to see if the ARPA report will still be providing an analysis in time to determine that. And I know Nolan is on. I don't want to put him on the spot, but if I've misspoken, feel free to correct me, Nolan.
Yeah, we did have a conversation about this, and Nolan, are you there?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this puts off the work until fiscal year 23, so there's no operation in it.
Okay, and it does allow for the ARPA information to get there in time for decision-making.
Oh, wait,
Or not. I'm looking
Double
at
checking right now.
September 21.
September
so-
21, I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah, it's got to be a problem.
Number 40, no, you're right, it's 20, there's no money in the bill. And I think Katie mentioned this, sorry, I was multitasking, where I think the financing was going to be determined by the working group in section 10, I believe it was.
10.
Yeah,
So
That's what it was.
that comes in November 30th, 2021.
Yeah,
The
it seems to
ARPA
me
proposal.
with the new dead dates on here, we would need to appropriate funds in FY '22. If I'm understanding it correctly, because the systems analysis RFP process starts in September 2021, like in a few months. So they would
we moved-
presumably hire that person or firm or whatever.
In 14, we moved the financing study to July 1, 2022. So
yeah.
that's where my head was a moment ago.
I know, but if you look
Yeah.
at the honor before 2021,
Yeah.
they're sending out the RFP, and we had talked about making sure,
Yeah, there needs to be money.
Yeah.
we got to have
both.
money, and it's about $150,000-$200,000 that was
Yeah.
in the original proposal.
It was
And we
200
put that
the original.
in Senator Lyons, I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, but in the memo that Jen Carby is working
Yep.
on, that's part of the recommendations is, I think we said 400,000 for these two studies in FY '22.
Yep, it is
what
in
we're
the
recommending.
bill. It's in there. So the question is, Nolan, on the dates that we worked so hard on.
This would need this in order to do the work, there would need to be an appropriation And like I said, initially in the House, we had heard 200,000 was the number that was being used.
Yeah.
And when the bill came over to the House, the dates were set from the House. The dates were such that it wasn't in
So
we needed the
if-
money. So we moved the dates. So yeah, we would have to come up with money.
September, it should be, so looking at section 12, it's on or before July 2022. Shouldn't then that be the September 2022 for the systems analysis to begin?
Section 12 is a different study.
Yeah,
Section
Where's-
13 is the
Oh,
healthcare
I
systems
got mixed up.
analysis.
Sorry, you're right.
There are
Thank
tons
you.
of studies. It's reasonable to be confused.
All right, so the Bright Futures piece,
so I'm thinking that maybe we only need an appropriation for section 13 this year, because section 14, the JFO isn't contracting with a consultant until July 1, 2022.
yes.
Does that make sense, Nolan? That we
Yeah,
would
no,
just need,
We just need that one appropriation this year, and
okay,
the number that had been thrown around and not thrown, used in human services was 200,000 initially.
Yep.
You could do 200, you could, whatever number you want to do, or you could hear from them as to what they think it should be, but
So what I'm hearing you say is that the dates are fine, it's the appropriations we need to be concerned about, and for just section 13.
13 only, not 14 yet, just 13.
Yeah.
We'd have to add that to the, you're
And
correct, you have to
yeah,
add that
but
to the
I think
letter.
let's do that. We'll put ourselves out on a limb with that one. But having that information before section 14 goes into place is really important, I think.
So we'll just need to amend that memo when we go over it, Senator
Yeah.
Lyons.
Yeah.
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 okay. And just so you can see the change I'm making, I'm in section 10 where section 10 says we're going to look to see if we can use ARPA funding for sections 13 and 14. So now I've changed that. So it'll just be looking to use ARPA funding for section 14, and we'll have to do the appropriation for section 13. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, the question I think is whether you want to have the appropriation in the bill or ask the Senate to do it on their end in the budget.
Yeah, this is the issue. I think let's leave all of the money in the bill. Leave it in the,
Okay.
and
So you'd
then,
want to have language of how money is appropriated to DCF for contracting with Building Bright Futures for doing this. I think Katie can probably use language that was in an older House version.
We haven't gotten to the appropriations section yet.
I don't think there is one. I think that
yeah, it just was in.
the appropriations that are in the bill are at the end of those sections.
Nolan, let me ask your opinion here. Is it easier to just take it out for that section and leave it in for section, for the subsequent, for 14? Which one do we need? We don't need money for
You need money for 13, not 14.
13. Huh? We don't need money for 13, we need money for,
No,
I
you
mean,
need for
just the
13.
reverse.
Yeah.
So should, your advice on taking out the money for the section that we don't need, section 14 at this time?
Well, there is no money in the bill. It was in the, I think Senator Hardy was talking about.
It's in the budget.
No, in the letter. Senator
Not anywhere.
Yeah, it's in the letter. It's 400
Okay,
letter for the two studies. I think that you can do is you
got it.
ask for the 200, just the 200 in the letter and not the other, just for the money for section 13. Or you can, and Katie's read the language now.
I
so.
see exactly what Katie's doing. That's the right thing to do. Leave it in the bill.
For
And then there won't be, what will there be with section 14?
Nothing.
That's what I thought. Okay,
Money this year.
So
It
if
needs
we're
money.
adding this appropriation into the bill, Katie, should we add the appropriations for the other stuff? Because they're not in this bill either. They're not in the budget and they're not in this bill. And we were just, the only place they are is in the letter that we're writing to the Appropriations Committee requesting that those funds be appropriated.
I think we should have the money in the bill. And that was
Okay.
that was the recommendation that I heard from appropriations. Now, if they've changed their mind, we'll hear that, but I think the money should be in the bill.
I agree, Senator Lyons, because they can always take it out in appropriations and put it in the budget if they want, but at least if it's in the bill, we're clear about the amounts.
Yep.
One question I have is I know for the IT expenditure, that money ended up in an IT reserve.
Right, that is
Um,
in H 439 already somewhere else.
Right.
is My
That's
understanding.
already
I
there.
So I wouldn't put that back in. So what would I be putting back in? I'd be putting back in the CCFAP, and then
Well,
the workforce.
The
I might rec-
scholarship and loan repayments.
So the workforce piece. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Please. Yes.
Let me just take a look
And
to make
thank
sure
you.
this. And there it's appropriated.
Katie, did you finish? I had 2 points I wanted to go back to, but I wanted you to finish going through what you had first.
Oh, sure. So section 14 also has changes. So this is the financing study. So the date has changed here to July 1 of 2022. The JFO is going to contract with an independent consultant. And then we have, in terms of the preliminary report coming back, we have the preliminary report coming back December 1st, 2022. An earlier version had November 1st, and that was bumped back again to give this financing consultant more time with the systems analysis. So now we've kind of bumped it in both directions. So that gives the person 5 months with the systems analysis to do the financing work. And then for the preliminary work, we've moved the date to January 15th, 2023. The House had 2024. And this is the final report. And then when this committee last met, there was conversation about wanting multiple financing options for public and private funding sources. So that has been incorporated. And then we're making sure that we're recognizing that this is a final report. I believe that is the only change. We might have had some. Oh, and then I updated the title of the bill. If you remember, the title of the bill has to do with governance, and the House struck reference to governance throughout this. So kind of the last remaining piece that hadn't been updated was the title. So I've done that here.
Okay.
Yes.
Are those all the changes?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Huh. All right. So questions on the first question that I have is, can we include all of the dollars, all the money? We need to do that, I guess, through the bill. And Nolan, you're going to have to help with that one, I think. And then the question about whether section 14 should also have dollars, even though it's forward-looking.
I don't think 14 needs money now.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's have a conversation about this.
Okay, I have one question I'm looking at the effective dates and wanted to make sure, Katie, that you've looked through those and they're still right. I think they are, but since we made changes in the dates, I wanted to make sure they still align.
Okay, let me take a look now. Okay, so in subsection A, we have sections 10 and 11 taking effect on passage. That still makes sense because that ARPA work is going to be happening right away. We have the rest of the act taking effect this July 1, which makes sense. And then sections 2 and 3 on CCFAP are still taking effect October 1, 2021. So yes, that still makes sense.
And was that the October date, is that to align with the federal fiscal year, or was there a logic to that, or is it to give DCF?
That's when the new IT, the first module of the new IT system is going to be up and running. So the changes to CCFAP can't take effect until the IT is in place. So that date is to align that all of the changes in CCFAP, the IT and the new kind of manner of payment are all taking effect at the same time.
Okay, great. Then I had two questions earlier in the bill that are different than what we just went over. I have to find them though.
Okay, keep looking. And if you have questions, committee, please raise your hands. And then I have a question for Senator Cummings when we get there. It's a joint fiscal committee question, Senator. And it relates to section, which section is it?
11.
Section 11. So I couldn't remember whether it was 10 or 11. Section 11, yep. Okay, so it will be on page 15 of what Katie has given us today. Ruth, do you have your questions?
Yeah, but we can do that one first and I'll come back to it since.
Okay, yeah, let's
go
do
for it,
that.
That's fine.
So Senator Cummings, I think before you came in, we talked about the money. Katie, you could talk a little bit about the urgency of getting this money out of the door, please, and then what changes we've made, and then from your perspective, Senator Cummings, whether or not the timing on this makes sense and how it would happen.
Okay, so we're back to looking at sort of sections 10 and 11, which are both work groups that are looking at how various ARPA funds can be used that are coming into the state. There are two sets of funds that are coming into the state that deal with childcare, and so they're dealt with separately in sections 10 and 11. So 10 is the block grant, 11 is childcare stabilization grants. And the testimony that the House received from Sarah Truckle of the Department for Children and Families was that this section 11 stabilization grants, there was a tighter time frame for these dollars getting out the door under ARPA. And so that there was a need for the money to have a mechanism for the money to go out the door faster. In section 10, it's just a report back to the General Assembly, allowing for the General Assembly to act when it comes back in January. Conversely, in section 11, in subsection C, there's a mechanism that the House set up that by September of this year, the department would submit its reports and its recommendations, just as it's doing in section 10. However, it's submitting it to JFC and to the chairs of the policy committees, and that JFC, upon receiving these recommendations, the House proposal was 5 days, and this proposal in this draft would be to extend it to 10 days, but would have a 10-day window to either approve or reject the work group's recommendations. And if JFC does not act within the 10 days, then the recommendations are just deemed approved, and the department is authorized to distribute the funds in accordance with the recommendations of that report. And then if JFC were to reject the recommendations, then they have to hold a meeting and take testimony from the department.
Okay. JFC generally meets, and I got the dates, but I think it does meet in September. It has a fall meeting. But what we've been doing is money comes in the administration. So I assume this would come as an administration request, would request that the money be approved and it would go out. Why you need to put a time frame, and I don't, or saying that if we don't approve it or disapprove it within 10 days is, I can't remember anything coming in like that.
Yeah, so right now, the request for these funds have to be in by September 1st, 2021. And then the need for the dollars to go out apparently is very, quick. It's very quick turnaround, trying to get the money out. So then how would you word it such that, joint
I
fiscal.
would say, upon approval, Nolan, do you know when joint fiscal meets? I'm pretty sure it's in September.
I'll look it up.
So the question would be then, can we even say that you must approve it in the September meeting? Suppose the September meeting is put off to the first week of October, I
Yeah,
just
I
want.
mean, I think,
I don't know if there's a set. A lot of times joint fiscal meets when it needs to meet,
yeah,
always a fixed meeting, so.
I think if you just say, the money needs to be approved by joint fiscal, because sometimes the fiscal committee will have questions or questions about how this ties up with other things.
So that
As
there's,
a member of the committee, when you tell me either I meet or it goes into effect anyway, it doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy.
we're
I
familiar with
mean,
that term.
it's poisoning the well. I don't think you need to do that. Just say, with the approval, and I'm pretty sure the joint fiscal office will know that there's an urgency to this.
So you're saying take out the 10 days altogether,
Yeah,
have it presented to joint fiscal for
yeah.
recommendation.
And then, because it comes in, we get expedited requests for grants, and it can come in as an expedited request. I mean, does the joint fiscal committee, frequently we get requests and it only comes up at a meeting if a member of the committee asks to have it brought up at a meeting. So it can, and they get emailed to the committees of jurisdiction. Actually, the grant request last year, they were getting emailed to everybody.
So,
You might
Senator,
drop a note to Steve Klein and see what he thinks would work best, or Catherine. But
I think the concern was the House put that in there because I think they wanted to make sure the process moved.
yeah,
Um,
tell them the Senate's used to moving. We get half the time they do. I'd drop it. Just Catherine and Steve seem to set those up. I'd just drop them a note and say what would work best to get this through ASAP.
okay, good suggestion. Katie and Nolan, can you hit or communicate with Catherine?
Sure. Remind me, like, what was I'm multitasking, so what question am I asking?
Katie, did you get it?
I got it. I can email them. So I'm just
Sorry.
gonna drop the paragraph
We
into an email.
triangulate in this committee.
What would work best?
I'm gonna
Alright.
drop the paragraph into an email for Catherine and Steve. And I'm gonna ask if this model works or if they think it would work better to have a model more like come into our September meeting for approval, something like that.
Yeah.
Or an alternative.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ruth, go
I
ahead.
think that,
Whoops.
I was just gonna agree with Senator Cummings that it does seem a little bit much like you have
Yeah.
10 days to do this,
Yeah.
even though we know that and so
What's the matter
seems
with
to
that
me that-
joint fiscal committee anyway?
it seems to me that you could say upon receipt, the joint fiscal committee shall approve or reject the working group's recommendation at its next regularly scheduled meeting. The request may be made as an expedited request, in which case a meeting will be scheduled more quickly or something
Yeah,
like
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
thi-
I'd just I'd ask them, because,
Yeah.
I mean, the regularly scheduled meeting has gone out the door. We were meeting 2 or 3 times a week.
Right. So my point is that you'll schedule a meeting and
Yeah.
you don't need to be told within 5 or 10 days.
Yeah, I mean, upon, the money's dispersed upon approval, and let them figure out what's the best way to
Yes,
get the money out.
if there's
or
an
get the
urgency to
approval
getting the
in.
money out, and we certainly have need in the state, I don't think anyone is going to abrogate responsibility. So I agree with Katie. Go ahead and connect with Catherine, and we'll get some language that fits us, suits us all.
Everybody happy.
Yeah, good. All right, good. Good work. Okay, that was important, because that one's been kind of bothering me for a bit. All right.
So Madam Chair, I just had
Go
two
ahead.
little things.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on page 4. it's,
Okay. Which we haven't gone through today, so this is helpful.
Exactly. So that's why I wanted to get back to it. It's section 4.
Mhm.
I think it's still page 4 in the version Katie sent us. I'm scrolling there.
Are you looking at little b?
I'm looking at actually, little b number 2.
Mhm.
On or before October 1st, 2021. I had this sort of noted that CDD had concerns about this. And I noted that they would either like the full thing struck or at least the date struck. And looking at the date and how we've changed the other dates, it seems to me that this date comes before any decisions are made about the use of funds, and it does seem to put the cart before the horse. So at the very least, I think striking that date or picking a different date might be helpful.
So this relates to the over $5 million CCFAP money, and that is planning for fiscal years 23 through 26. And so the date is October 21, to look at a pretty complex issue. So date change, Katie, or Katie or Nolan, I think here with what the date change might be to keep all of this moving forward without putting undue pressure on CDD.
Well, it's just, this is expressing that this is the intent of the General
Yeah.
Assembly, that by this date, no family will pay more than 10%. And
I
that
get that.
seems like super fast. And I'm not even sure if the money appropriated would cover, allow that to happen. So I'm
what
not-
would be the date that we would suggest so that it's not such a instantaneous turnaround?
So I can tell you that the conversation on the House side, this date wasn't in until we knew that there was ARPA funding coming. And then it was added in because I guess the House was thinking they could now meet that date, whereas they weren't sure that they could do it before. And they heard testimony that with the flip that's happening in the CCFAP program, they're already getting really close to the 10% for CCFAP families. So I think that's why they thought they could do that. And again, this is sort of a financial piece. So if Nolan has a different memory of why that date was added, feel free to weigh in. But that was sort of the conversation. So I think you could be silent on a date. You could just strike it out altogether and just say it's the intent of the General Assembly that, we move towards this 10%, no more than 10% of a family's gross income for CCFAP families. That's an option. I don't know that I would feel comfortable in giving you kind of an arbitrary date,
No.
though.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing, Katie. I was thinking just take the date out. And Nolan, are you there? I know he's so busy. Okay, so that one option is to take the date out. Another is to move it into 2022 somewhere, like January or February but I would think that given the progress that's already being made, take the date out. But Nolan, here you are. We're on page 4, and Senator Hardy has asked a question about the date in little b2 of October 1st for the intent language, and trying to get some work done on income eligibility.
Okay, so
So Katie was indicating to us that some work is already going on in the department, and that the date may or may not be necessary, but we all felt it looked like a pretty quick turnaround, given everything else that's going on.
I don't remember the conversations other than the fact that, I mean, it is intent language. So
Yeah,
I think that's a policy decision.
thank you.
It just seems like it comes before the two financings, before the work group looks at the potential use of ARPA, and it comes before the financing study. At the very least, that work group ceases to exist on January 1st, 2022. So it's potential that we could just move the date to January 1st, 2022, because that's when presumably that group will have completely completed its work. But I also agree that we could just take out the date and just have it as it's our intent that this happens. But
Okay,
There
let's committee, let's weigh in on this. Who is in favor of taking the date out? I am. I'll be in favor of taking the date out. Yeah, okay. Is there anybody who doesn't want to take the date out and would like to modify the date?
Can I just ask a question?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
Just a concern that the date not be left kind of way out in the future. I mean, this is something that, everybody wants to happen soon. And how can we affect, make sure that that's the intent that is known? I mean, I don't know if we needed to modify the intent by saying sooner rather than later. I don't know what the legislative language.
Well, I agree that it should come after the first work group. And
Yeah.
I mean, so if anything, if the date were going to be modified, maybe you'd want to say February 1st or January 15th or something like that. And then that gives some reassurance that there's a date certain.
yeah, I think that's a good compromise. You could say February 1st, and then also gives us a month if things have completely blown up. We could change it.
There you go.
So that gives them more time and gives at least the initial ARPA working group time to look at the funding. And
Senator Cummings, you had your hand up.
No, I'm confused about what date. I got
Page 4.
I got fixated on number 2 at the top of page 4, that by October of this year, co-payments at the upper limit will be no more than 10%.
That's it.
that's
an
what we're
intent-
talking about.
That's
Yeah.
the intent
Yeah.
language.
Well, I think that's a nice goal, but if we use ARPA money to put that into effect, and then we do not come up with a continuing financing scheme, you're just setting folks up to fall off a cliff, and I'm not sure.
Which is why it's intent language. It's intent language. And there's no way that this can be financed with one-time money.
No, and not ongoing, and not by October of this year.
Right.
Yeah, so the question is, Senator, to take the date out or to modify the date.
Out.
I think we should
that
do
it's
that.
our intent that we get there.
Yeah, I'm fine with taking the date out.
Yeah.
It seems way too soon and none of us are sure what date makes sense. So then having no date seems to be
Well,
the
it's not
best
going to
option.
make sense before the financing plan comes in,
Or any
Yeah.
plan comes in.
or any
So,
plan. Yeah.
yeah, so those plans will certainly inform any decisions. So good, okay, so
Okay,
we took
great.
the date out, Katie.
The one other small thing I have, and this is just for discussion or get your opinion, is in the working group. So
Page.
I think it's page 13
Mhm.
on the original, let me see. Is it still
What-
page 13, Katie? Section 10,
Okay. So find section 10, and in the Katie handout for today, it's on page 12, and it
Yeah.
has the employer business interests that we looked at. Go ahead.
Yep, so on the next page, page 13, in the list of things they're supposed to consider as possible uses for ARPA funds.
Mhm.
I had a request from, you might know about the leadership program for childcare professionals. It's a program through the Snelling Center. It's one of the many programs that they do on leadership, and it's for early childhood professionals. It's a great program. And they wanted to see if leadership could be inserted in there as a leadership programs, generic, not just their leadership programs, but as part of workforce, as a thing that could be considered to be funded. No commitment on funding or anything, but just I think the place that it seemed to make sense, and I obviously defer to you, Katie, but on number 4, adding just funding necessary to support leadership programs and to implement blah, blah, or something like that. But that was the one thing I wanted to ask about.
So this is a specific program, and what's being identified in the bill are the scholarship and I think loan repayment. Is that right,
Right.
Katie? Yeah,
Right.
so are you suggesting then, what is a suggestion? That the leadership programs be included as part of the scholarship and,
No, just that, so this is just a list of things that this working group shall consider the following. So this is just a list of things for them to consider. They don't have to do anything. They can just reject it, or they could say, oh, that's a good idea, or do something totally different, because it also says need not be limited to the consideration of the listed priorities. So my suggestion is just to add generic leadership programs somewhere in here, or my
Katie, any
request.
suggestion about where that might go? I don't know how many other childcare leadership programs there are in the state. So others, I find it difficult to add something that might point to a single entity, although it's a very good entity. No, there's no question about that.
No, I agree, Jenny, or Senator
Yeah.
Lyons. I was trying to find a sort of generic way to say it.
Yeah,
I think it's a program that I think a lot of childcare leaders and professionals have done, and it's great. And it seems like it's a use of one-time funds to help pay for somebody to do this, but
well, I do think that the folks who will be involved in these working groups will have a sense of what programs are out there in the state and may well include the leadership program. I know how, this is a tough one. I get it. Katie, do you see any language possible here?
Well, I think it's sort of a policy choice whether you want it in
Yeah.
or not. But I think if you do want it in, the language that Senator Hardy suggested in subdivision 4, funding necessary to support leadership programs and implement the child care workforce programs, I think that would work. As somebody noted, this list is not limited to the items on the list. So even if you don't mention something, it could still be considered, but putting it on the list kind of gives specific instructions that this is definitely an item of importance to us that we want considered. So I would say it's
I'm-
up to the committee.
Okay, so I would say not put it in at this point.
Okay. I
But
just
you
wanted
know,
to bring it up and I will
No,
suggest
it's
to
a
them
very
that
good
they,
idea. There's absolutely no question about that.
yeah, I'll suggest to them that they talk with members of the working group when the working group is formed as a potential avenue. So thank you for your consideration.
Good, good point. Anything else? Questions committee for Katie on the language or any other questions that, changes that you think are important to be made at this point? Okay, so I think, Katie, if you reach out to Catherine on that one issue on joint fiscal committee, and then if we can have all of the money through the bill, in the bill, that was, and that's actually a request of appropriation, so I think it's an important thing to do. And then fine tune the changes that we have made today. And then what I think should happen is we come back to this first thing in the morning, tomorrow morning, and try to get through it for a possible vote. So and I, I know. So my question to the committee is, given the time that we have, and if you've looked at our, just as an aside, as you've looked at our agenda for tomorrow, there are, everybody and his sister are looking to testify on S-120. And we have, it's time to either fish or cut bait. So I'm saying to folks who are interested in testifying to hold off and testify when the little commission goes out to hear you. So we can't do any more than what we've done. I think we understand the issues on that one. So my question of you is, would you prefer, and I think it might be helpful to meet beginning at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Is that a change that you can live with? Look at Ann.
Started at before 9 every day last week. I thought this week, I'll try. We've got grandkids that are on school vacation this week.
Oh, no.
They're
Okay.
downstairs, but
Okay,
I will do my best.
Let's make it 8:45.
Okay.
15 more minutes will do us a lot of good. So let's say 8:40.
Settle down.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Nellie, if you're there, we'll have to do a little time change. Now, Katie, does that work for you? You're the most important one sitting here right now.
I can do 8:30 if that works.
Yeah, 8:30 will work. for me.
8:30 works? Okay, all
Hmm.
right.
Or 8:45.
All right, let's do
Either
8:30
is
and
an
then then we can get our work done and we can take a little break. That will be good. Okay, so the 8:30 tomorrow, markup and possible vote. Mostly it's going to be possible vote on H-171. And then we'll find out everything we've done wrong. You know that. Okay, terrific. Anything else on that bill? Okay. Then we're a little bit behind on getting to the budget memo, but I'm going to suggest a 4-minute stretch. Jen, is that okay with you? Okay, 4-minute stretch and we'll come back and look at the budget memo that Ruth and Nolan and Jen and I've helped out a little bit. We've been working very hard on this. So 4 minutes.